The question I set out for myself was to find out how the world works and how we could change it. That was the challenge I took on. So basically for about 20 years was spent learning things and publishing. I published on an email list before they called things blogs, so I had subscribers and I would write essays and then people would write back saying, well, you missed this, or you should read this, or have you thought of this? And so it was really a collaborative process with the people I was writing for on the internet. And I ended up writing a book with the brash title of Escaping the Matrix, How We the People Can Change the World. And which, it turns out that, at least in my mind, figuring out how the world works is actually, to a first approximation, very simple. It's just a hierarchy run by psychopaths,
Welcome to the March 13th, 2018 edition of The Electric View. My name is Neil Thompson. We got Robert, Cameron, Jim, Edwin, Gene, Peter, Buddy, and David on today with our new friend Richard Moore. In this segment, we're going to talk about the future of sustainable living and take on the task of discovering humanity's place on this little ball of rock.
The things I wrote about in my book actually happened in Vancouver. In Vancouver, they actually had what they call wisdom councils, which is where they bring 12 or so people together, randomly selected from the community, and have them have a conversation, maybe deal with certain problems, maybe just let the conversation go where it goes. And they did 3 of these in series. And the results were really amazing in that you'd have people that didn't know each other, that with radically different political beliefs, whatever, and then end up like bonding and through collective thinking, coming up with really great ideas and they come out with a feeling like, wow, this is how society could operate, So all of that was very encouraging, but there just doesn't seem to be any way to actually get anybody interested in it. Like there'd be a newspaper article about it. People would read it, oh, that's kind of interesting, and then the next day they're reading about the World Cup. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So I came to the conclusion that, in my opinion, there's a goal which we would have to reach if we wanted to have what we would call a stable, livable society that works for us, but I don't know any way to get there. So at that point I kind of said, well, I looked around for other things to be interested in, and I discovered the electric universe, which obviously is the new cosmological paradigm.
Amen.
A lot of people haven't woken up to it.
Amen, Ra.
And then I've been having some conversation with David and doing thinking, and I really feel the community is missing something, and it's missing ideas challenging one another and having actual conversations about. It's like each of the researchers does their thing. Don does his, and Walt does his, and Dave does his, and they're each wonderful. And but then they kind of leave each other alone. We don't want to get into any discussions. We might argue. We might disagree. Might be uncomfortable, And I think that any scientific community that's going to advance has got to have, much as it's been corrupted in mainstream science, the idea of papers being exchanged and peer review, a debate through papers and stuff. And of course, it's like I say, it's been corrupted where the peer review process is a ossification process. But that kind of exchange, I think, needs to happen if a branch of science is going to mature and grow and get on to the next level. So that's a lot from me.
Thanks for
letting me share.
Awesome.
That's actually a really good opinion. We were discussing that on the Electric Universe Theory page one time when it was like, no, we should not agree. We shouldn't agree on everything. We should disagree within the paradigm, which is just a very general thing. Do we agree that electromagnetism is important in the universe and has if not a dominant but significant role? Okay, if we're in that general camp, then we can argue with each other about what that means, and we should debate.
Right.
Yeah.
It's the uncomfortableness that allow, like, what was it? It was a thing that it was the uncomfortableness of the shell of a lobster that causes it to shed and grow. It does this because it's uncomfortable. Well, we get better when we're uncomfortable. When things get more comfortable, we're like, okay, I think we got it. Do we got it? But we can also lull ourselves into the false sense of security because we can go, no, in 1960 we have it all figured out now. Star Trek is real, and we got black holes, baby.
Well, it stagnates.
Yeah, well, and
yourself.
Yeah, 50 years later, you're not so sure.
Right. But, I mean, one of the things that happens with if you have disparate ideologies, though, it's like the dialectic process that was so famous back in the with the Republic, etc. That thing depends on everyone having kind of a collective. There's a deep group bond and cohesiveness to have a dialectic. If there's factions, they're always just going to polarize. You know?
Yeah, and they're going to use the lowest common denominator of arguments. You're a friggin' idiot. That's why.
Yeah. And then the rock star hurling and
yes.
etc. So, yeah.
Well, Thomas Kuhn said something about this in his book, The Structure of Scientific Revolutions, when he said, in times of evolution, institutions are great. They're going to do, but they form ranks in times of revolution because we're going to burn them down. You know, I mean, if you're not going to let us play your game, you're going to ostracize ARP and you're going to shove him out and then you're going to shove all these other people out. All the people who are going, I have a question about this. And by the time they're done, they realize they're all in one camp. They didn't realize they made a camp for them. This is the camp where you sit now and you don't get to play in our table. You'll never get funding. You're over here now. Well, it's very hard to you can't be between them. Like, very few people can play that dance, like Anthony Pratt, maybe. Because, I mean, they're not going to fire someone who builds, like, rockets and stuff because he's smart. You know? but because they have a use for him. But there is no use for ARP. To us there is, and to what he's saying, there's truly something to his work. But he got thrown to the wolves, so did Salentic, so did people after people, and now that camp is now building itself into a whole new institution. And that's the way that, and unfortunately, it's going to outlive their lives. So it's really us or people like us who are going to be continuing that trend and selling it, I guess, to other people.
Right.
Oddly,
I'm going to redirect really quickly because I think probably just to continue the introduction process.
I forgot there was even an introduction process.
I'd like to congratulate Ito on the great traffic and awareness that he brought to the EU this week, and the kind of the new avenues that opened up, and maybe Ito, you could kind of introduce yourself and share what's going on.
If I may jump in though, real quick.
Yeah,
sure.
Yeah.
Kind of this, what I'm about to say kind of concerns what Richard just said and what Ito has been doing, because I just saw a post on Facebook about the Fibonacci sequence and how it relates to the atomic structure. So I kind of posted that on the structured atom group just for people to see, to get their input on it. But that's just kind of like what was feeding into it, like propose different ideas and to discuss them. But since it involved both of their works, I just wanted to jump in on that for everybody else to see.
Nice.
Floor is yours,
Well, there's quite a bit happening. Most people here know me, I think, but for those that don't, My name is Ido Kaal. I live in Netherlands. For a few years now, I've been connecting to the electric universe, like everybody else, I guess. I've given a presentation in the breakout room in 2016 about the structure of the nucleus of the atom. I've been able to do that again, but then on the main stage in 2017. My background is environmental chemistry, and I've been working in the IT sector. And for about 10, 11, 12 years now, I've been chasing this structure of the nucleus. Not even intended to do that at first, but as time progressed, I found out what I had. And now I'm trying to bring that to the world. And just 2 days ago, the presentation of last year was posted on the Thunderbolts platform on YouTube. And I'm getting good response. So pretty happy, but also kind of dazed. There you go.
Nice.
A lot of it all at once, huh?
You're famous now. So that's what's happening.
Can I bring up something, guys? Yeah, we were talking about it yesterday. It was put up on March 11. So here it is 2 days later. It has had over 7,000 views.
Nice.
That's great.
And I would say over 90% of the comments are kind of like, oh my God.
Yeah.
You know,
That's great.
It's really positive.
I have no clue what the normal views are. It kind of changes, you know, at the Thunderbolts videos. Some have really awesome numbers and some a bit lower. But we'll see how it goes, how it takes off from here. Yeah. If I may use the opportunity there, David, in response to our guest here, when you were describing, you know, that you were looking for the problem in the society or in the world, and the conclusions that you came to, how you need to have, you know, small communities, etc. What struck me very much was, but is that not like the natural way of living? If you look at the Native Americans or Native anywhere, basically, the tribal system, if you will. Right? A family is a unit. Some families is a little village. Several villages together is a tribe. Several tribes together is a people. Something to that effect.
By the time you get villages, you've got agriculture. So the models I was thinking more of was in the hunter-gatherer area.
Sure.
Hunter-gathering in terms of how the political decisions are made. When you get to agriculture, then you pretty soon get hierarchy already.
Right.
So,
borders are established.
Huh?
Well, because borders are established, you got to have the area to cultivate.
Territory and land and stationary.
Well, there's a lot we could say about that. I mean, part of it is once you have surplus food, then it's possible for somebody and a few henchmen to take control of the food and dole it out.
Right.
Whereas in a hunter-gatherer, there wasn't there was no chief who could sit at home and let everybody else do the hunter and gathering. Everybody had to go out and participate. So there's an egalitarian nature to the small hunter-gatherer band, which has a hard time surviving as technology evolves. So, how does one go back to that kind of political organization without, and at the same time be modern?
We're back to Isaac Asimov again. Sorry, there's just a wonderful. Go out, Ido. I'm just.
Well, I just responded there as quickly as you did, Daniel. But I said maybe we can't, right? Not without going back to that hunter-gatherer society and leaving agriculture behind, because agriculture, of course, that has everything to do with possession and claiming of land. While the forest with the game and the seas with the fish, they belong to everybody, right? There's the big difference, I would say, and many other things.
There are. I guess like in Mexico, there are places where people practice communal agriculture, where there's a small tribe or say a village which has land that it owns or that it it belongs to it, and they sow the things together and harvest them together and share the food. So I mean, there are other ways. I don't think we need to. Well, we won't go back to hunter gathering. So it's like not even worth discussing in a practical sense. But that way of on a small scale, where people pretty much know each other, and you have sort of an ongoing consensus. I mean, if you take a community now and you try to reach consensus, that's a big, fantastically difficult problem on anything. But if you had achieved consensus, then maintaining it is something that's feasible.
And you just described the scientific institutions of the day. As long as we can maintain consensus and keep all the rabble out there, we're okay. We're going to keep making money. This is a good plan. Don't you agree? Shake hands. Hands.
Except I wasn't talking about consensus on.
No, I know. It's just
how
weird.
We're going to operate. Oh yeah. Okay.
Nice.
I can picture.
Let's just go. Yeah, please.
Are you still doing introductions?
Yes. Let's go.
Okay, I'll come back.
No. Go.
Oh, well, I wanted to talk more about what you guys are talking about, actually.
Yep.
Okay, so I wondered if you had read Weston A. Price, Richard, or anybody.
What?
Weston A. Price? I'll try.
No.
Highly recommended. Let's see, a book is called Nutrition and Physical Degeneration. And I guess what I wanted to talk about on that, well, he's a dentist who did research on tribal groups that you're talking about, essentially people that were isolated from the British Empire and all of that. And what he found was really profound about eating from the land versus eating things like jam and biscuits. And really, really neat. I can't say enough about it. It kind of changed my view about how I should eat, how we should be eating, and the change in our consciousness that resulted. So you could have a society that had some hierarchy, let's say a modest amount of hierarchy, but more like the ones that are respected are listened to. And the younger ones still have a lot to learn and so on. So there had to be kind of a natural hierarchy. But the point was getting away from the British Empire's type of food made every difference in the way the society operated. Really, really good reading. And I've wanted to talk about it with the EU group, but it seems kind of out of left field. But it gave me the kind of hope that the electric universe does. In other words, a way to get back to a much more healthy consciousness and body type and so on. So what I see walking around are a bunch of people that could have looked quite different if they had eaten from the land. In other words, I've wondered why it is that people look like they do, and some people say it's genetics, like it's better look at nutrition.
A lot of these groups would generate their entire. I mean, go down into the Amazon and they have totally different consciousnesses. Each group develops its own, unique, beautiful consciousness. You see, as we've seen looking back through history.
Right.
And it's like that should be something that's promoted instead of this, Unitarian. There's one truth,
Right.
There's
totally
this multiplicity of truths.
I agree, and I totally loved what Richard was saying about the small communities, and that I would just moderate that a little bit and say that there needs to be some hierarchy, and not assume that people are going to be to behave in the ways that we've seen, like really.
Well, he hit the nail on the head with regards to surplus too. I mean, that's allowed. I mean, the Roman Empire was sort of like a bunch of farmers that ended up with a military because of this control idea. And then if you keep moving forward, people were machines. They were the workers. They were the things that were doing things. They were assets, and they need to be controlled and managed to build what you're doing. But
even once the aristocrats had vomitoriums and orgies.
Good times. So we move on to a little bit further, and you get into to like today, and then beyond. Now we have machines, but now the machines will be able to do things for us. What happens when we reach the point where we're surrounded by an army of robots who just take care of us all the time? What is the nature?
Vomitoriums and the orgies.
Well, that's the hedonist part, but she's right completely that there needs to be some sort of direction. I mean, you still want your artisans, and there's going to be people who, no, I just like farming. Can I be one of the farmers? I want to be a farmer because that's what I like. That's fine. But there's other things you wouldn't like. It's sort of like starts entering into that weird Star Trek world where you're not quite sure, and you can get replication if you want, or no, you can go live off the land. There's nothing to stop you. Just a thought.
One book that I found really interesting, sort of dealing with this question of what's possible for human society, is Cloud Atlas. I don't know. Has anybody read Cloud Atlas?
Mm-hmm. I downloaded the movie. I don't have it.
Movie.
Yeah, I never watched it though.
Well, the movie.
Feel bad.
The movie it was like giving you one paragraph from every scene.
Right.
It was so. It really missed so much, and it's very readable science fiction. But the question it's asking is kind of like, is there any hope? Because it goes into the future, says, well, we have the nuclear war and all, and now we're starting with small communities, and it seems to be working. And then, we get raided by another small community, So it's like they play out the scenarios, starting back sometime in the 18th, 19th century, and then going on into the future. Sort of replaying, could it be different? Could we do it differently? So it's interesting from that perspective. I'm not saying it has any answers.
There's a movie actually that's coming out just recently. I'm very interested in now you've basically forced me. I'm going to have to go watch Cloud Atlas now and probably read a book. But anyway, the opposite of enlightenment comes from this new Peter Jackson movie that's called, I'm not sure if it's called Cities or something like that, but they're giant cities. Like, there's a town that's driving with a flat platform on it and has wheels and everything. It's driving along, and it's like a tank, and it's going over the landscape because at this time, cities have become mobile objects that are looking for things to eat as they run out of resources. And big cities eat smaller cities because they're driving along and they look behind them, and this girl makes a dramatic pose and she's sitting there going, and the kid goes, "What's that?" And he goes, "That's London." And this city is with a great big, like, the Big Ben on top is just moving towards them, and it's like shooting things at them, trying to grab them and pull them into its maw so it can be processed the other city. So, just as a horrific idea of what happens if we don't learn to get along. I think the future is being written, Terminator, but city-sized Terminators. That blows my mind.
I have a few things to say about the beginning of the conversation here, where we were talking about staying connected and being naturally the electric universe is interdisciplinary, so it involves all of the different disciplines, and I think that's what a lot of its mass appeal is that you can approach it from the biological perspective, the cosmological perspective, even the theological perspective. And I think that's, a lot of what can help knit the group and keep the group together and strong, is that interdisciplinary, and like Ben Davidson does so well.
Well, it's needed if we're not going to. I mean, a lot of people come here for their own reasons, and and to I like to think that conversations like this are the glue that brings it all together. And we don't, and as Richard pointed out, the idea that they're disparate, like here's and isolated, here's Don, here's Wall, here, other people have their own theories. And when they talk, they have arguments with each other. Especially the mythologists.
Always.
Reconstructive mythology is obviously something that's, has a lot of it. Well, who knows everything? I mean, that's a question. Like, how much of history do you know? How much of electrical engineering do you know? How much of all the theories, current theories, do you know? And then, do you have enough ability to rewrite, a history? That's
right.
It's a big task.
The one that keeps coming through for me is you go for what is. That's kind of there's two perspective points, and one's what is, and then what's going to be is another one. And when you start getting that intention piece, what's going to be, then the belief system and what the vision is it becomes very important all of a sudden, versus when what is, that's very diagnostic, versus the other one where it's what's going to be. Then there's like a spirituality that comes into it. How do I envision, what's coming into the, from the ether, quote unquote?
Well, it still can be predicted. I mean, we had, great vision. Alan Toffler, I think his name was. And there was the other guy with the Global Village, Marshall McLuhan, and how we sort of reached into this idea that, well, here's the emerging technologies and what can it do. I remember back in 2000, I had a class on communication theory with Dr. David Barney, and we were discussing what is the nature of communication and then what will it be in the future. And we were thinking that everyone was going to have a computer on them. Like they carried around a computer, like on a watch or, and look at what we're at. We have smartphones now, so it's kind of the way things, like technology is moving that, but communication's easy. Now we're at the point where, no, I want to be able to print out what you showed me. And now we're at a point where, no, not just on paper. No, I want to print out a physical object that you've mailed to me. So,
is there any examples of sustainable cities? I mean, I know Richard was talking about it, and possibly the only way to do it is through exclusive means, which lead to inclusive means ultimately. But is there any examples? I mean, I know in China they've already beat their they were supposed to plant a certain amount of trees by 2030. They've already beat that and surpassed it, and now they have the largest forest, reconstructed forests in the world. And that's just a little example of people working together on mass scales, what we can do. Anybody know about any sustainable communities? Because I know there's different places in Russia I heard of, and possibly some in China, being built, new tech cities and whatnot.
I don't know about sustainable cities, but I heard if you listen to the right people, you can go to like San Francisco, and they say that's like fairly utopic, but it's a trash hole now, in my opinion.
No, I drove through it. It seemed quite nice, but at the same time, I didn't stop everywhere. I usually retreated to the mountains because it was colder and I could swim in the Yuba River, where people are like, it's too cold. I'm like, yeah, no, it's great.
He's Canadian.
I'm the only one here.
You get these two phases. I mean, the one that keeps coming up to me is there's the generation phase, and then there's the degeneration phase. That that's part of life, part of our existence. And that we tend to, when we think of this, it's only the generation phase, and we don't think about the demise part that's naturally part of the cycle. That's
well, it's like the meme there. Hard times make strong people, and then strong people make good times, and good times make weak people, and the cycle continues.
Right.
Agreed.
let me come in with something. I almost hate to bring it up, but back when I was looking for sustainable types of communities and co-housing and that sort of stuff, it seemed to me that communities that already exist were having a terrible time making changes, even if they intended it. And I could see the sort of the same infighting and sort of obnoxious people that take charge happening in the co-housing groups and stuff. I mean, I really intended to join one. And then I took a second look and I thought, no, I'm not doing that. And, well, let me go on. What I didn't want to bring up was the idea of sort of this fear that we're running out of oil. You know, the peak oil stuff. Does that ring a bell with people?
Sure.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
So what I decided after doing more research was that that is not the case. That oil is not biological. It's not from fossil dinosaurs or something like that.
It's not pureed dinosaur? Really?
Right. And
it's not a rare commodity.
Well, you know, I don't want to go into all the research I did, but some of it had to do with these absolutely huge reserves up in Alaska that are not being talked about, that sort of thing. And how oil is the currency of the world. Anyway, on and on and on. I finally gave up on the idea of peak oil, and so I decided, you know, there wasn't much I could do about it. I wanted to look for something hopeful, and that was the electric universe, you know. And so that's all I wanted to say.
Yeah. I mean, I think this is one of you know, I'll bring this into quantum mechanics somehow, but it's like this essential nature of having to count everything, and you know, it's particularly large amounts of things, instead of like the overall view of how is this for the greater good, et cetera, has been pervasive. You know,
okay.
Particularly. Sure.
I just wanted to follow up one comment on what she was just talking about the co-housing and whatever, because that's also something I went to a lot of places, different kinds of communities, different kinds of co-housing, you know, eco villages, et cetera, et cetera. And the thing is, I think the problem is that their reason for coming together is either they want a certain community lifestyle, they want to be sustainable, things like they want to be ecologically sensible, all of that. But what they don't realize is the most central problem of all in any society is the system of governance. Exactly. I mean, how you and you got to see that not we have to have a house meeting every week. That's a drag. I mean, it can't be a secondary thing, a follow-on thing. It's got to be the primary thing. Is how decisions are going to be made and how people are, you know, how they're going to work out problems. And I haven't seen very many community attempts where we really saw that as the central problem, the central organizing principle, that it needs to be.
Because once you start making the argument that government is the problem, they don't want you around.
Well, no, governance. I mean, how are decisions made in the community?
Well, that would still establish a hierarchy or people in charge, and if you go against them, you're in trouble.
No, it doesn't do that at all. No, I mean, it's possible to sit around in a circle, and it's not that there's a real distinction that needs to be made here. It's not that you have proposals on the table and you need to decide which one to adopt. It's that as a group, you create the answer that's needed for the situation.
I can understand that.
The one thing that comes in though is that power curve, and you know you kind of see it as far as like get grade distributions, and then you know you see it in the art field a lot, but it's okay. We're going to have 100% of this group of people are going to try to do art, right? there's always going to be that one shining one that everyone gravitates to, and they say it ends up creating this natural hierarchy, etc.
Oh,
I'm sure you've seen this.
Yeah, Burbage talked about this in that Universe Cosmology Quest video where he said, "Yeah, I was." So this is Vera Rubin. She did a bunch of things on the velocity profiles of these galaxies. And about 1/3 into her work, apparently, she did her preliminary report said that the preliminary report said that she was getting some weird results. And so he had to basically decide, it was his decision, but he let the people in the room talk. And of course, the preeminent astronomer said, well, she's obviously making mistakes. This is obviously erroneous data according to our theory, so we should just cancel the program. And everyone in the room were like, oh, yeah, that's a good idea. Yeah. But he said, I had the final word, so I ignored him. But it was the same problem you just described.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Well, for sustainability in socioeconomics, every time my mind goes to education, what's the best education for my child? And then I look at Norway. And then I look at what else Norway's doing. Then I look at the surrounding area, Switzerland, all these other different places. And time after time again, I'm confounded.
I know, those Swiss are shifty. I don't trust them.
The recidivism rate for people going to jail and going back to jail is extremely low. And then the education's great, and I think they just got to the point where they ran out of trash because their recycling programs are so good. So, I mean, let's talk about this kind of stuff. How can we get there? I mean, we're
Sweden,
here.
yes.
Yeah, we're here. This is real. This is happening on the planet. You know, this is cross evolution as we're watching it spawn and spur. I mean, what can we do to catch up, or have we just given up? I mean, I know we pulled out of the Paris weather agreement, but that's because everybody's just flying with their numbers surpassing us. Like, we're already a post-industrial nation, seems like.
I don't want to insult anything. I'm just saying that there is in a form of governance where you have the ability to affect your government more. You can do things like that. I don't know how to describe it. The ability for business to control certain governments, or the ability for them to have I mean, obviously it's important to have an economic plan, but when Sweden can go, no, we're gonna change this to make this happen because we want, this to happen. We want to get rid of trash, for example. We want to recycle. If that's the idea, and you put your mind towards it, and you make subsidies on that regard. It's the same thing here when we had a recycling program. Everything here is recycled, but we pay for workers to do that, and and I'm sure other cities do it too. But it's about will, and it's about how much you can enforce your will. The lobbying of the United States and bribery can change, and corruption, as you guys pointed out, can be a problem. And other places are worse than others, and all countries also have certain aspects of that too. I mean, even without that, there's still powerful people who have, powerful friends, nudge, nudge, wink, wink. I mean, just, what happens when well, yeah.
There'll always be that need to, or desire to, that will come up to exploit the situation. Someone will go, how can I dominate this? This is part of what we experience in human nature. Look at this thing. How can I ride it and be,
Well, that's my first question. That's my first question. How can I get my daughter over there to experience that education? I want to ride it. I want to go there, and I want to become it, and I want to have my kid experience it. Unless there's programs here, that, I mean, if it's like a school, like a Waldorf school, take for example, if it's a school curriculum, then it can be replicated, and it can be a program that's taken and brought over here and disseminated in different schools.
Not so much, because you got to deal with the Department of Education.
Hey, don't keep throwing my ideas down. I'm coming over there.
Well, I mean, it'd be easier for you, as opposed to dealing with the Department of Education, it'd be way easier for you to just expatriate and go to Denmark.
Peter!
You know? Hey, Peter.
I think we lost Edwin too, but I hope he gets back.
He did, yeah.
Have to someone poke Edwin and see if he's alive.
Richard, do you have any thoughts on what we're talking about here?
Edwin had to step out for a minute.
How does Peter?
There he is.
Well,
yeah.
like looking at a country like Norway. I mean, yeah, you see lots of. I think part of it has to do with homogeneity of culture. It's easier to sort of get everybody to go a certain way if they. I mean, a place like the United States it's really not a nation; it's an empire. You know.
Yeah.
I mean, each state is like the size of what a nation should be. So it's a whole different level of non-connectedness.